It's me and you forever. If I can't have you, nobody will. Lisa held her ground, though her knees threatened to buckle. Ken's eyes burned with intensity, a dangerous mix of love and possession that sent chills down her spine. Ken, she said softly, trying to steady her voice. You don't have to do this. Ken's smile faded. Do what? Love you. Protect you. His voice cracked. You made me like this, Lisa. You gave me hope when I had none. And now you want to take it all away. Tasha stepped in front of Lisa, her voice firm. That's enough. You need to leave. Ken's gaze flicked to Tasha, his jaw tightening. You think you can keep us apart? I don't think I know. Tasha shot back. Lisa's done with you. You need help, Ken. Serious help. Ken laughed, a dark, hollow sound. Help. He shook his head, his eyes locking back onto Lisa. The only help I need is you, Lisa. You're my cure. My reason to keep going. Lisa swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. Ken, please. His expression softened for a moment. You don't have to be afraid. I'd never hurt you. He took a step forward. But anyone who tries to take you from me, they won't be so lucky. Before anyone could react, Ken pulled a small, silver knife from his coat. Tasha's eyes widened. Are you insane? Ken's hand trembled as he pointed the blade at Tasha. She's been poisoning you against me. I see it now. She's the problem. Lisa stepped in front of Tasha. No, Ken. This isn't her fault. This is between you and me. Ken's gaze softened again, his eyes brimming with tears. It's always been you and me, Lisa. No one else matters. Then prove it, Lisa whispered, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside her. Put the knife down. Let's talk. Ken's hand trembled, his grip loosening slightly. For a moment, it seemed like he might listen. But then his eyes darkened again. You don't get it, he murmured. There's no talking. There's only us. Suddenly, there was a loud bang as the front door burst open. Police! Drop the weapon. Ken spun around, the knife still in his hand. His eyes darted between the officers and Lisa. You called the cops. Ken's voice cracked with disbelief. His gaze returned to Lisa, filled with hurt and betrayal. You betrayed me? Lisa's voice broke. You left me no choice. Ken's expression twisted with rage. You think you can get rid of me? His voice rose, frantic and desperate. You'll never be free of me, Lisa. Never. The officers moved closer, their guns drawn. Drop the knife, Ken. Ken's eyes locked on Lisa one last time. His voice dropped to a whisper. I'll always love you. And then, before anyone could stop him, Ken plunged the knife into his own chest. Lisa screamed. Ken. The aftermath. Lisa sat on the hospital bench, her hands shaking as she stared at the blood on her clothes. Tasha sat beside her, silent and pale. The doctors had taken Ken into surgery. His fate hung in the balance. Do you think he'll make it? Lisa whispered. Tasha sighed. Does it matter? Lisa swallowed hard. It matters to me. Tasha shook her head. He tried to ruin your life, Lisa. He nearly killed you. Lisa nodded slowly. I know, but a part of me still remembers the man I loved. Tasha placed a hand on her shoulder. That man is gone. You need to let him go. Lisa's eyes filled with tears as she whispered. What if I can't? Lisa sat motionless in the hospital waiting room. The sterile white walls closed in around her, and the faint beeping of machines echoed through the hall. Time felt like it had stopped, but her mind raced with memories. Memories of Ken. The way he used to smile at her like she was his entire world. The way he'd hold her hand, whispering promises of forever. There was a time when she believed those promises. A time when she loved him more than life itself. But that love had turned into something dark. Something suffocating. Lisa. She looked up to see the doctor standing in front of her. His expression was grim. He's stable for now. The knife missed his heart, but he lost a lot of blood. He's going to need psychiatric evaluation. Lisa's heart twisted. She should have felt relief. Instead, all she felt was guilt. Can I see him? She whispered. The doctor hesitated. He's still sedated, but yes. Just for a few minutes. Tasha grabbed her arm as she stood. Are you sure about this? Lisa nodded. I need to do this. Lisa walked into the dimly lit hospital room, her footsteps echoing on the tiled floor. Ken lay on the bed, pale and still. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped steadily, keeping him alive. Her heart ached as she looked at him. Despite everything he'd done, he was still the man she once loved. The man who had saved her on that rooftop years ago. She sat down beside him, her fingers trembling as she reached for his hand. Ken, her voice cracked. Why did it have to be this way? His eyes fluttered open slowly, and when they focused on her, his expression softened. Lisa. Tears filled her eyes. Why did you do this to yourself? Ken smiled weakly. Because I can't live without you. Lisa shook her head. This isn't love, Ken. Love doesn't hurt. Love doesn't control. Ken's grip on her hand tightened slightly. You don't understand. I've lost everything, Lisa. You're all I have left. Her heart broke at the desperation in his voice. You need help, Ken. Real help. Ken's eyes darkened. I don't need anyone but you. Lisa stood, pulling her hand away. No, Ken. You need to fix yourself. I can't be your cure anymore. Ken's gaze followed her, filled with sadness and longing. So, you're really leaving me? Lisa wiped away a tear. I have to. If I stay, we'll destroy each other. Ken's lips trembled. Please, Lisa, don't go. She took a shaky breath. I'm not the answer to your pain, Ken. You have to find that on your own. Ken closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks. I'll never stop loving you. Lisa's voice trembled. And I'll always remember the man you used to be. With one last look at the man she once loved, Lisa turned and walked out of the room, leaving Ken behind. 1 month later, Lisa stood on the rooftop, staring out at the city skyline. The wind blew through her hair, and for the first time in a long time, she felt free. Tasha joined her, handing her a cup of coffee. You okay? Lisa smiled faintly. I think I will be. Tasha nudged her playfully. So what now? Lisa took a deep breath, the weight of the past finally lifting from her shoulders. Now I live. For myself. For my future. As the sun set over the city, Lisa knew she was finally free. But deep down, she also knew that some scars never fully heal. It had been 6 months since Lisa walked out of Ken's life. She often wondered if she made the right choice. The memories of his obsession haunted her, but so did the memories of the man she had once loved. The man who made her feel like the most important person in the world. One evening, as she walked home from work, she stopped in her tracks. A figure stood across the street, watching her. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Ken. He looked different. Healthier. His shoulders were squared, his posture confident. But his eyes, those same brown eyes, still held the depth of his love for her. Ken, Lisa whispered. He crossed the street, stopping a few feet away from her. Lisa. She couldn't believe he was standing there, after all this time. What are you doing here? Ken smiled softly. I've been waiting for you. Lisa's heart ached. You're supposed to be in rehab. I finished, Ken said quietly. And I'm better now. But there was one thing I needed to do before I could really move on. What's that? Lisa asked, her voice trembling. Ken took a step closer. I needed to see you. To say thank you. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Ken nodded. You saved me, Lisa. You made me see that I needed help. And I've spent the last 6 months getting better, learning how to live without hurting the people I love. Lisa's heart swelled with emotion. She stepped forward, placing a hand on his cheek. I'm proud of you, Ken. Ken closed his eyes, savoring her touch. I couldn't have done it without you. For a moment, they stood in silence, the world around them fading away. Lisa leaned in, pressing her lips gently to his. It was a kiss filled with forgiveness, hope, and love. When they pulled away, Ken's eyes shone with tears. Does this mean we can start over? Lisa smiled through her tears. Not yet. Ken frowned. What do you mean? Lisa took his hands in hers. You've made so much progress, but there's more work to do. Let's go back. To the clinic. Together. I'll be there for you every step of the way. Ken's lips trembled. You'd do that for me? Lisa nodded. I will. Because I still care about you. And I want to see you become the man I know you can be. Ken hugged her tightly, burying his face in her shoulder. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for not giving up on me. 3 months later, Ken sat in his room at the rehab center, staring at the calendar. 1 more week, and he would be free to leave. His heart raced at the thought of seeing Lisa again. She had visited him every week, encouraging him, helping him heal. Her presence gave him strength. But something felt off. She hadn't visited this week. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Ken, you've got mail, the nurse said, handing him an envelope. Ken's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a letter, written in Lisa's familiar handwriting. Dear Ken, I've watched you grow stronger every day, and I'm so proud of you. But now, it's time for you to stand on your own. I've decided to move to a new country, to start fresh. Not because I don't care, but because I need you to learn how to live without me. You've spent too long making me your home, Ken. Now it's time for you to find a home within yourself. Thank you for the love you gave me, even when it was messy and broken. You taught me so much about myself, and I'll always carry those memories with me. But this is where our story ends. Take care of yourself. Stay strong. And never forget, you're capable of becoming the man you were meant to be. Goodbye, Ken. With love, Lisa. Ken's tears spilled onto the paper as he clutched the letter to his chest. For the first time in his life, he wasn't angry. He wasn't hurt. He was grateful. Thank you, Lisa, he whispered through his tears. You saved me. He stood, walking to the window and staring out at the horizon. You were my home, and I'll miss you forever. But deep down, Ken knew Lisa was right. It was time to start over. Ken stood at the airport terminal, clutching the letter Lisa had left for him. Her words echoed in his mind. It's time for you to find a home within yourself. Those words haunted him. He had spent so long building his life around Lisa that he had forgotten how to stand on his own. But now he had no choice. It had been 6 months since Lisa left, and every day felt like a battle. He often wondered if he would ever feel whole again. But he was determined to try. The flight attendant's voice crackled over the speakers, announcing his flight to Italy. Ken took a deep breath and stepped forward. 3 weeks in Italy. Italy was everything Ken had imagined it would be: bustling streets, stunning architecture, and a culture that felt both foreign and comforting. He spent his days exploring the city of Florence, wandering through art galleries, and sitting in quiet cafes. But no matter where he went, Lisa was always in his thoughts. Ken thought that leaving his city would help him forget Lisa. He thought that a new place, a new country, would wipe away the memories. But he was wrong. No matter where he went, Lisa was still with him. When he walked through the streets of Florence, he imagined her walking beside him. When he sat in a cafe, he pictured her sitting across from him, smiling the way she used to. He couldn't escape her. One evening in Italy, Ken sat alone on the steps of an old church. The city was quiet, the streets empty. He pulled out his phone and stared at Lisa's name. His fingers hovered over the screen. Should I call her? No. She left. She made her choice. But still his heart ached. Ken took a deep breath and looked up at the stars. I have to move on, he whispered. But moving on was hard. The days passed slowly. Ken tried to keep busy, visiting museums, tasting Italian food, walking through the markets. But every time he saw something beautiful, he thought of Lisa. She would have loved this, he whispered to himself. One afternoon, he sat by the Arno River, watching the water flow. A man playing the violin caught his attention. The music was soft, sad, and full of emotion. Ken closed his eyes. For a moment, he let the music take him back. Back to when he and Lisa were happy. Back to when love felt simple. A letter to Lisa. That night, Ken sat in his hotel room. He pulled out a notebook and started writing. Dear Lisa, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to say it. I miss you. I miss everything about you. Italy is beautiful, but every time I see something new, I wish you were here. I've tried to move on, but it's hard, because a part of me still belongs to you. I don't know where you are, or if you ever think about me, but I want you to know, you'll always be in my heart. Ken. Letting go. Ken folded the letter and walked back to the Arno River. He held the letter in his hand, staring at it for a long time. Then, with a deep breath, he let it go. The wind carried it into the water, and he watched as the letter floated away. He whispered, I love you, Lisa. Goodbye for now. Weeks after letting the letter float away in the Arno River, Ken thought he was finally free. He walked through Venice this time, his shoes tapping lightly on the cobblestone streets. The city was magical, filled with lovers on gondolas and candlelit dinners by the canals. But Ken, he walked alone. He told himself he was fine. I'm free now, he thought. But late at night, in his quiet hotel room, Lisa's voice still echoed in his mind. Her laughter, her tears, the way she used to whisper, You'll always be my forever. An unexpected encounter. One morning, Ken walked into a small bookshop. It was quiet inside, the air smelling of old pages and leather covers. As he browsed, his eyes landed on a familiar figure. Lisa. Ken froze. Was it her? Or was his mind playing tricks on him again? The woman turned around, and it wasn't Lisa, but she looked exactly like her. Her hair, her smile, even the way she tilted her head when she read something interesting. Ken's heart pounded. Are you okay? the woman asked, noticing his shock. I thought you were someone I knew, Ken whispered. A painful reminder. Ken left the bookshop, his heart heavy. No matter where he went, Lisa was still with him. In faces, in places, in memories he couldn't erase. That evening, as he walked along the Grand Canal, he thought of her again. He remembered how she used to trace her fingers along his face, whispering, "You're my home, Ken." Ken stopped by the water, gripping the railing. "She's gone," he whispered. "She's not coming back." But his heart didn't care. It still loved her. A phone call that changes everything. The next day, Ken's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, a number he didn't recognize. "Hello," Ken answered. There was a long pause. Then a familiar voice. "Ken, it's me." Ken's heart stopped. It was Lisa. "Lisa," he whispered, his voice shaking. I needed to hear your voice," she said softly. Ken sat down, his hands trembling. "I thought you left for good," he said. "I did. But," Lisa's voice broke. "I never stopped thinking about you." Ken closed his eyes, tears burning behind his lids. "I never stopped thinking about you either." The truth comes out. They talked for hours. Lisa told him everything. How she had left because she felt lost and broken. How she thought she was saving them both by walking away. "I was wrong, Ken," Lisa whispered. "I thought leaving would help me heal. But I've only been hurting more." Ken wiped a tear from his cheek. "I was angry at you. But I understand now." They both fell silent, letting the weight of their words sink in. "Where are you now?" Ken asked. I'm in Florence," Lisa said. "I went back to where we started." Ken stood up. "I'm coming to you." Ken walked out of the cafe, his heart pounding. The streets of Florence blurred in front of him. He had just seen the love of his life holding someone else's hand. After everything, after all the memories, after she called him and said she still loved him. "I'm done," he whispered to himself, shaking his head. "I'm not doing this again." But then, "Ken, wait." He froze. Her voice. Ken turned slowly, and there she was, Lisa running after him. Her eyes were full of tears, and her hair blew wildly in the wind. "Ken, please. Let me explain," she said, breathless. But Ken shook his head. "I saw enough, Lisa." Lisa grabbed his arm, refusing to let him walk away. "Ken, I wasn't with him because I love him. I needed to know if you've truly changed." Ken frowned, confused. "What?" Lisa wiped her tears. "If this was the old you, you would have stormed in there. You would have broken things. You would have attacked him." Ken stared at her, shocked. "I needed to know if you've healed," Lisa continued. "I needed to know if you're still the man who would hurt people to protect your pride." Ken's reaction. Ken let out a bitter laugh. "So this was a test?" Lisa nodded slowly. "I had to be sure." Ken took a deep breath, his fists clenching at his sides. "Lisa, I have spent months trying to get over you. I've walked through cities alone. I've cried myself to sleep. I've written letters I never sent." He took a step closer to her. "And now you tell me you were testing me?" Lisa looked away, ashamed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Ken shook his head. "You can't play with people like that. You can't play with me like that." Ken stared at her for a long moment. Then, without saying a word, he pulled her into his arms. Their lips met in a kiss so full of love and emotion that the world seemed to disappear around them. The rain started to fall, but they didn't care. They kissed like it was the first time, like it was the last time. When they finally pulled away, Lisa whispered, "I'm sorry for everything." Ken touched her face gently. "I forgive you. A new beginning." As they walked hand in hand through the streets of Florence, Ken whispered, "Let's not test each other anymore." Lisa smiled. "No more tests. Only love." Ken kissed her hand. "I'll love you forever, Lisa. You are my home."